All right. Thank you, Claire. And good morning, everybody. Thank you for being here and being part of the conference. It's my great pleasure to introduce our keynote speaker this morning, Commissioner Brenda Burman. Commissioner Brenda Berman is the first woman ever to serve as commissioner for the U.S. Bureau of Reclamation, taking up the position after over 25 years of experience working on Western water and natural resource issues. Previously, she served in the Department of Interior as Deputy Assistant Secretary for Water and Science and as Reclamation's Deputy Commissioner, and many other roles working for Senator Kyle. So many of us in the room, so to speak, in the virtual room, have known Commissioner Berman for many years. And we're delighted that you've been able to take the time and fit this into, we know, a very busy schedule. So I'm going to turn it over to you and then be back after your remarks to field some questions. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Sharon. Thank you to the University of Arizona. Thank you to the Water Resources Research Center. Thank you in particular to Dr. Sharon Megdal. Sharon, we've known each other many years through all of the different capacities that we've both worked in Arizona water throughout. And I just want to say, first of all, that I'm proud to be here as a Wildcat alum. I am proud to be here working on these great issues for Secretary Bernhardt and for President Trump. And I thought we should start off thinking about the commitment you've made to put this conference on, because I don't think any of us thought 4 or 5 months ago that it would be possible for us all to be communicating like this in such a seamless manner. And I agree, thanks to all of the people behind the scenes who are making this work. But whether it's the Supreme Court experimenting with virtual oral argument, or the way we've found to reach out to, I know my relatives are spread across the United States, but finding this way to communicate by video has been, I know, just really useful for us. I was in Arizona as the pandemic was declared. What was that, March 10th or 11th? And baseball was canceled. And I watched as so many people jumped in their rental cars and went to the airport and went home early, and just saw how much devastation that was going to cause to Arizona. The hotels, the restaurants, all of the different industries that rely on all of those visits. I have to say, I was really hopeful I was going to be in Arizona just a couple of weeks later for this conference. But here we are virtually. I'm very proud of the men and women of Reclamation who have made this work. We are on maximum telework. That means almost everybody is at home, unless you have to be in the power plant or at the dam. But we are making sure that water and power moves forward. We're communicating in different ways. Like I think you all are facing the same thing. How do we bring our employees together? You know, how do we make sure they're connecting with each other? So we've been trying new things. Probably many of you have been doing these for years, but for Reclamation, it's new to us. But up on Twitter, we've been running a Water Heroes campaign. I know some of you do that as well. But highlighting, like, who are some of the individuals out there, whether they're in the field collecting fish samples, whether they're in the power plant, whether they're helping build the Navajo-Gallup pipeline, you know, trying to recognize those folks and make sure that our employees, but also you, understand kind of all the hard work that's going on. So please look for us on social media. We're expanding our presence. I really appreciated the polls yesterday. So we were going to put up 2 poll questions now. And the idea being, I can't see you, I can't react to you in different chairs, but maybe we could learn a little bit more about you as an audience. So can we put up the first poll? And so we're asking, we'd like to know more about who you are in the audience and what is your primary focus in water? Can we see it yet?
76% have answered.
Ah. I can't see the results from here. Are we ready to go to the second poll question? Ah, there we have it. Well, look at that. That's very impressive. Local and state water management, overwhelmingly. That's wonderful. I expected to see more tribal, but we'll see. Why don't we move on to the second poll question? We are looking at, in order to better understand your experience with the Colorado River system, did you participate in any of the following? Wow, okay, that's very good to know. That helps me as I start to talk about kind of a lot of the things we've been through in the last few years and what we're looking for in the future. Thanks everybody for answering the poll. Really interesting, very interesting. All right, as we move forward, those of you who know us well know that often by tradition at Reclamation, we start off talking about hydrology. And if we could go to the next slide. This is a slide of Western hydrology, and we're here in Arizona, and I'm talking about the Colorado River, but I thought it was important to look at the context of the entire West. And as you'll see, surprisingly, it doesn't happen very often, Arizona is actually a bright spot on the Southwest hydrology at the moment. Arizona's reservoirs are almost full. It's actually the highest numbers we've seen in a really long time. But as you look out across the basin, I think what you're going to see is it's been dry. It's been drier than we expected. Just to give you some ideas as far as runoff on the Colorado River Basin. So we look at current hydrology, and we look at the unregulated inflow, and that's into Lake Powell. So in the current April through July unregulated inflow projection, we are just at 4.1 million acre feet. That's just 57% of average. If you remember, last year, we had an above normal year, and that was wonderful. I had hoped that maybe for the first time in 20 years, we might have 2 above average years in a row. That hasn't happened since the 1990s, and it looks like it's not going to happen again this year. It's a very poor year for runoff. Just for comparison, back in January, we thought we were at 82% for runoff, which is an okay year, but we've been trending downward. If we look at our operating condition for this year, for 2020, we look at Lake Mead, and consistent with the lower basin drought contingency plan, and I'll talk a little bit more about the drought contingency plan soon, and the Mexico binational water scarcity contingency plan under Minute 323, water savings contributions are required in 2020. We're at something called Tier 0. So what that means is that the United States and Mexico are making contributions to Lake Mead, water savings that are kept in Lake Mead, and help our insurance policy that we keep up there in water. So that means Mexico is contributing 41,000 acre feet in 2020, Arizona 192,000 acre feet, and Nevada is at 8,000 acre feet. That means those water savings alone are going to add 2 feet to Lake Mead next year, which is really incredible. But looking out in our future, what do we see on the horizon? The next part of 2020 into 21 and beyond. Well, each month, Reclamation does a 24-month study. We look out ahead 2 years. We look to the models to show us what do the projections show us, kind of the ranges of what could be possible. In our June 24-month study, we looked at the elevation of what we expect Lake Mead to be at the end of the year. And that tells us what's going to happen. We also know that that elevation is right now projected to be at 1085. So that puts us above a shortage condition, but it puts us at a tier 1. So it puts us at those DCP contributions for next year. Based on the April 24-month study, we also know that this year looks like a year that Lake Powell will be releasing about 8.23 million acre-feet in 2020. Lake Mead's elevation storage at the end of 2021, there's a range. We're looking at the future, and that range could be anywhere from 1074 to 1109. Those of you who are Colorado River wonks know that means the tiniest possible chance of shortage in 2022, but it also means that we could be in a much wetter hydrology. So the probability of shortage in 2022, using our stress test hydrology, looking at the worst possible hydrology, that is 12% for 2022. But in 2023, it goes up to 47% with stress hydrology. So I think what it means is we know we're doing a lot of work in the basin to protect ourselves and protect our water supply, but we don't know exactly what the future holds, and we need to be prepared for it. I know Herb Gunther mentioned yesterday that as folks were working on the 2007 guidelines, they had hoped they were facing a temporary shortage. We all did. We thought we were into a 7-year devastating drought. But here we are 13 years later, and it's still dry. We know our reservoirs could go to critically low elevations, but we also know that we've taken the steps to move forward. So with everything that Arizona and our nation is facing today, I'm especially pleased that our partners and stakeholders here in Arizona and across all the West were able to complete drought contingency plans for the Colorado River Basin last year. Let's go to the next slide. Signing the drought contingency plan agreements last year was a huge accomplishment. After years of discussions in Arizona, in the lower basin, in the upper basin, with Mexico, working together, we were able to complete the drought contingency plans for both the upper and the lower basins. And we put in the binational water scarcity plan with the Republic of Mexico went into effect. With the next slide. Here is the happy group of partners on top of Hoover Dam last year. We had a beautiful day. And this is just a small number of the people that it took to move DCP to completion. And I have to say that no state had a harder task in doing that than Arizona. No one should be more proud of the success of getting to DCP than Arizona. As former Secretary Babbitt noted yesterday, it was yet another example of Arizona coming together to address its water challenges and prepare for the future. While I'm here virtually with such a large cross-section of the Arizona water community, people who are new to these issues, people who have been working on them probably their whole career, I just wanted to take a moment and recognize the work of Arizona's Lower Basin Drought Contingency Plan Steering Committee, performed under the leadership of Tom Bushatsky and Ted Cook as co-chairs. Tom and Ted were able to facilitate an outcome on the DCP that was supported across all sectors, and it led to successful and timely state and federal legislation. Congratulations once again. Let's go to the next slide. I wanted to put up a slide that some of you have probably seen me use before. I really like how this slide tells a story. It tells a story about the challenges we have faced this year through this 20-year drought, but also the history of the law of the river and the challenges we faced on the river. Here you see it's our water storage history through Lake Mead and Lake Powell. So we start with Lake Mead, and then you see in 1965, Lake Powell starts to fill. And you can see the milestones of the law of the river as we go by. I think you can see we've watched how we've been flush with hydrology. We've had full reservoirs. Back up in 1999, we were basically full in both Lake Mead and Lake Powell. But let's take a look at what happened next. And you can see kind of our peak over there in 1999 in the yellow lettering, and what happens between 2000 and 2004. Well, I think this graphic shows us, and it shows us that in just 4 years, we lost half of our storage. We lost half of the reservoir system, and we didn't know when it was going to stop. That's what forced all the parties, forced the states to come to the table and look at shortage guidelines, which we put in place in 2007. As you watch the hydrology since 2004 and 2007, we've largely bounced along. But we also knew at the end of 18, we were at the worst storage we had seen since Lake Powell began filling. And we came together as communities across our disciplines, as tribes, as NGOs, as water suppliers, as states, to find those solutions, because we knew we couldn't let Lake Mead go to critical elevations, because too many people depend on that river, too many resources, too much agriculture depends on that river for us to let it drop without us doing something about it. I also want you to take a look, because this is the history of the Colorado River. I think you're going to see a lot of historic milestones. If you go to the next slide. This is our history of many of those of you who are in this program, watching virtually. We have the 2001 interim surplus guidelines. Secretary Babbitt had a lot to do with that in the history and leading up to through the 1990s. We have the 2003 Quantification Settlement Agreement, the QSA, so important to California's ability to move forward and work within its allocation. We have the 2004 Arizona Water Settlements Act, very special to me. We have the 2005 Lower Colorado River Multi-Species Conservation Program, the MSCP, the 2007 Interim Shortage Guidelines, and then we also have the work with Mexico, the adoption in 2012 of Minute 2019, and the adoption in 2017 of its successor Minute 323. And by minute means it's an addition to the 1944 treaty we have with Mexico. It's an agreement of how we're going to work within that treaty to move forward. Just remarkable accomplishments over the last 25 years. So yesterday, you visited with a number of those water leaders who were directly responsible for those victories and for those mile markers as we move forward on the Colorado River. We have had no shortage of water leaders in Arizona. Secretary Babbitt certainly helped chart the path of modern era of collaboration on the river. Senator Kyle is a champion for resolving the water rights claims of Indian water rights claims across Arizona, finding certainty for tribal communities, finding certainty for their neighbors as we all move forward. And as you saw yesterday, we have certainly benefited from the excellent leadership at the Department of Water Resources through these past 25 years. Reclamation is working to live up to our commitments on the river. Under the Drought Contingency Plan, the DCP, we committed in the lower basin to bringing to the table 100,000 acre feet to improve the resilience of the basin. So that's a year. That's looking at about a foot in Lake Mead each year that we could contribute to the system. We're working towards it. As an example, in 2020, Reclamation and the Fort McDowell Yavapai Nation entered into an agreement to create some subsistence conservation water behind Lake Mead. We're looking at these short-term solutions, but we also know we need long-term solutions, like the 242 well field in Yuma. It's a project to build our flexibility, build our capacity, how we deliver to Mexico. We've also supported the efforts of farmers in central Arizona to secure drought resiliency funding. And we're happy to report that recently the Department of Agriculture awarded $10 million to assist in the well and related infrastructure to support efforts of DCP implementation. So moving forward there. It's hard to overstate the importance of the DCP. We have taken concrete steps as a basin, as a nation, internationally to avoid a crisis. We have incentivized conservation, we've shored up our insurance policy in those reservoirs, and we've put ourselves in a strong position to tackle those issues of the future. Let's go to the next slide, please. Another Colorado River success story I like to feature and highlight is our Lower Basin Multi-Species Conservation Program. This is the MSCP. It's a unique program. It provides ESA compliance for those diverting from the river and for reclamation's operations on the river. This is our 15th year of implementing the MSCP, and it's our job to bring to the table over 8,000 acres of new habitat. We've done that working with our partners. We have put in place about 17 conservation areas through last year. I was lucky enough, you can see in the picture, we were able to open the Dennis Underwood Conservation Area last year. It's just a great program. We'll put another conservation area in place this year. That's bringing our habitat. But the most remarkable part is it's like the movie Field of Dreams. If you build it, they will come, because we've put habitat in place, and those endangered birds, those threatened birds, the species that we're watching for, they're all coming back. It's just incredible. Kudos to everyone who supports that program and to the reclamation folks on the ground making sure that it works. Let's go to the next slide. As the last key undertaking, I wanted to talk to you and highlight our ongoing work to evaluate the effectiveness of the 2007 guidelines. They've been in place for 13 years now. The Drought Contingency Plan, the DCP, has been in place for a year. And this look back is referred to as our 7D report. And that's because the record of decision from 2007 requires the department to evaluate the effectiveness of what we've done. To us, it just makes good sense. You need to review if something has worked before you look to the future, before we look to what is the next step on the Colorado River. So last December, at the annual Colorado River Water Users Association meeting in Las Vegas, which sometimes seems like a lifetime ago, Secretary Bernhardt gave us clear directions, didn't he? He said on this review process, he said, start early. We're starting a year early so that we're ready to move forward. He said, be inclusive. That the basin states need to be part of this, but so do the tribes, so do the NGOs. So do the water districts. And he said this shouldn't be an encyclopedia that no one's ever going to pick up. It should be succinct. It should be useful. And this is just what we're doing. So the goals of this look back, of this review, are first, to evaluate the effectiveness of the 2007 guidelines, and two, to document our operational experience since those guidelines were put in place. We've hosted webinars in March. They were attended by over 200 of our partners and stakeholders. And that was to look at the scope, the approach we were going to use. And we've received many wide range of written comments. We thank you all for those of you who have contributed. If you're interested, you can look at them on our website. But we're working to refine our approach to put that together, and we're hoping to have a draft to you in early August. So that's our goal. Our goal is to finish by the end of the year. But please stay involved. If you want to know what's going on, get on our website. You can see the website at the bottom there. But you can sign up for email. You'll get an email every time something new is happening. So what I do want to emphasize is this is a look back. This is not the start of reconsultation for the next set of operational guidelines. While Arizona may be gearing up to start that process internally, the Department of the Interior remains focused on the 7D review. But I was pleased to hear that Arizona is recently announced it is preparing for that eventual development of what comes next, what should be the next set of rules. And I've heard that the Arizona's program has now going to reconvene that group they put together so importantly for the DCP, and they have formed the Arizona Reconsultation Committee, or the ARC. You heard about that yesterday. But this group is charged with developing an Arizona consensus on the reconsultation of the guidelines that will govern coordination and operation of Lake Powell and Lake Mead. Very encouraged by this step. Secretary Bernhardt noted in December, it was the participation and the support, not just of the traditional water users, but it took the support of the tribes, the NGOs, to ensure the success of the DCP. It will take those same partners for us to successfully go towards and make our future. So I applaud you, Arizona, for the early work that you're getting done and developing ideas, forging that consensus that we'll all need to move forward. Because we know the success of the DCP, we know what it looked like. It was 7 basin states, it was tribes, it was water districts, it was NGOs, and it was Mexico. And we all worked together in a complementary fashion to make that work. And that's the vision we have for post-2026. While Reclamation hasn't started a formal process for that, that doesn't mean that it's too early for you as stakeholders, for you as partners, to be reaching across what might be traditional lines that separate us and to craft the next generation of solutions. That's your job. And I commend you for starting, Arizona. Well, while the ARC will be focused on the future, I thought I'd just mention a few observations from watching yesterday. I was able to watch a little bit of the program yesterday. And Secretary Babbitt, you are always thought-provoking. You focused on Arizona's development of a water transfer policy. You suggested looking at the 1980 groundwater code as a model for how that might happen. I'll tell you that Reclamation has traditionally deferred to state recommendations on these types of matters. But it certainly helps us in relying on the state if there is robust policy that's been forged through consensus. I have to say, I was so impressed with the panel of past Arizona Department of Water Resource directors yesterday. You all are incredible. Each of you went through so much. But I do want to say I was really struck, Sandy, as Sandy recounted the personal toll it took of reducing staff during the Great Recession. Just as commissioner, I recognize that our success is our people. Our success is in being able to recruit, train, and retain that talented, creative workforce, the people who got DCP done. We know the ones we know will need to face our future challenges. And with the crisis, the economic news that we're all facing, whether it's local or state or tribal or here in the federal government, these fiscal stresses are real. And I hope we can do everything we can to retain and support our talented women and men across our agencies. We're going to need them. With that, I just want to thank you, Sharon, thank you to the WRRC for the chance to focus on Colorado River this morning. It's nice to be virtually surrounded by so many friends, so many colleagues, so many rising stars in Arizona water. May each of you stay healthy. May each of you stay safe. And thank you for this opportunity today. Thanks, Sharon.
Well, thank you really for that broad ranging set of comments, ranging from the hydrology over a long period of time to where we are now. And thank you also for fielding those polling questions, because they helped us know a little bit more about our audience. We did a couple yesterday, but not the same way. And I saw almost 10% of the respondents were students. And so that's great.
Oh, that was great.
To your last comments there about the leadership and the staffing, we want the talent in the room, so to speak, to stay with us and work on these issues in all sorts of capacities. So it was great to see that. So I'm going to start off with a question or two. And one of them you anticipated, and that was that you have the website. We will, with your permission, be posting your slides afterwards. So if people want to be kept informed as to activities in the Colorado River Basin activities of reclamation, they can sign up for that. Is that correct?
That's correct. That'd be great. There's so much information on our website. You can find about the history. You can find all the documents we've been talking about. It is a great resource, whether you want to be diving into the hydrology or thinking about what was the drought contingency plan. You can find it right there.
Right, and that's great, because I think there's going to be a lot of interest in following the process, and so that's great. You mentioned tribal participation in your remarks, and you noted on the polling the results of tribal focus. And you know, we in Arizona, as you know, had our own process that, as you mentioned, was led by Ted Cook and Tom Bishotsky, and tribal participation was very strong and important to that process. But we've also heard in multiple settings that past processes, including the guidelines and the DCP, have failed to adequately ensure tribal participation as these programs were being developed. What are your thoughts about how tribal communities and other communities who have not been traditionally represented can be more appropriately included in the future?
Thanks, Sharon. First, I'll say Secretary Bernhardt was clear on this. The reason DCP was successful is because we included a wider group, and that's what we're going to need to do in the future. But I also want to look back on the history a little bit, because back in 2007, I was with the department as we were putting together the guidelines, and we had outreach. To that date, it was the most inclusive process that had ever happened on the Colorado River. But of course, we look back now and we say that wasn't enough, was it? It needs to be more. And so for the DCP, we recognized that it was going to have to be more. And so Leslie Myers, she runs the Phoenix office for the Bureau of Reclamation. She heard this from tribes, and she started a tribal group to complement the Arizona process. And they held over 150 meetings. It was an incredible opportunity for input and back and forth, and to really hash through different ideas and statements, circumstances. I think that was a great model, and I can see us using that in the future. So I think what we know is it's a wider, broader world. And the only reason we got DCP done when we went to Congress is because we had strong support from tribes, and we had strong supports from the environmental groups, from the NGOs. And that's the kind of broad consensus we're going to need in the future. So I say we build from DCP, we make it better, we make it stronger, we make it even more transparent, and we move forward.
Great. And I'd like to note that I find the tribal basin study that Reclamation released about, was it a year and a half ago? Maybe I'm losing track of the years. Very valuable. I use that cover map all the time in presentations, so it's a great resource.
It is a great resource. I encourage people to go find it. It allowed each tribe to speak from its own perspective about its needs and its resources on the Colorado River. It's a truly great resource. We're very proud we completed that.
Yeah. So my other question is more about the science. You had the slide up there showing the storage in the reservoirs over time, and talked quite a bit about the hydrology. And given the duration and severity of the drought, is Reclamation using what the climate scientists are saying about the risks we face in a warmer, drier West?
That is an easy answer, Sharon, and you bet we are. We use the best information and science that can be found. When we talk about that modeling and looking forward, we know that we have to be using the best information. So what we know is climate scientists are telling us it's going to be a warmer and drier West. I think you could see some of that this year. Makes you think about it in a really deep way. But a very recent example, just to something that people can go to and look at as an example, is the publication of the Colorado River Basin Climate and Hydrology State of the Science Report. So this was put together by the Western Water Assessment. It's based out of the University of Colorado, but it includes input from University of Arizona. This report provides an important go-to for what are the foundations of science of what we know? What are the gaps in knowledge? What could we be looking for? And I think that that's so important is we do need to be looking forward. We need to know what new tools can we find to help us manage the river in the future so that we can all rely on it. We know that we need to be thinking of creative ideas for policy. We might be looking at legal changes, but we know that we also need to make sure with the absolute best information. So this report identifies gaps that are out there. I expect you and your colleagues are jumping right on that because we need better information, we need better tools. This is a great place to start for thinking about that.
Yes, and that came out just pretty recently, a couple months ago, that right. Study. So I have to admit that it was a little overwhelming when I went to the website to see how much is part of that particular study. And just as a last question, and this is a very, very specific one, but it's one that comes up a lot when I take my students on a field trip to recharge sites with the basins. And this question just has, is evaporation considered in calculating additions to lake elevations?
So we've been doing some recent studies to update our understanding of evaporation on both Lake Powell and Lake Mead, because we do look at evaporation when we expect, like, what will the elevation of Lake Mead be next year, or what will the elevation of Lake Powell be? But we also recognize that we were basing that on some assumptions for some very old studies. So we've been looking to update that, and you can find more information about that with Reclamation.
All right, that's great. Well, we are out of time. We so much appreciate your spending this time with us this morning and sharing both the look back and the look forward. And I think a lot of the people in our virtual room plan to be with you. We're at almost 400 people right now. Excellent. So I think this helps get the word out about the great work you're all doing. And we, again, thank you for being here this morning.
Well, thank you, Sharon. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.